Our gospel reading this morning comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill, so the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and you're going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world, but those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he is falling asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, but for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. As a chaplain resident in Tampa, I was often called to the bedside of those who were terminally ill, those who were actively dying. or to be with the families of those who had passed. Many stories were shared with me about life, love, joy, sorrow, regrets, and triumphs. I heard anger, I heard weeping, I heard sorrow, I heard joy, I heard love, bargaining, and acceptance. I remember being at the bedside of a Cuban patriarch who had immigrated here during the rise of Fidel Castro. He had been here a while, he and his whole family. His family was large, and they were all at the bedside, every single one of them. And while there was certainly grief present in the room, I could also sense in their spirits there was also a lot of love, and you could hear laughter as they shared stories. They retold the stories of his life to each other and to me. I heard a lot about his truthfulness and how much there was a specific type of sandal he really liked, and he would demand it if he did not get it and his were worn out. They offered up favorite memories and what he had passed on and taught to each and every one of them. The love this family had for each other and for their waning patriarch was palpable. They asked that I offer a prayer, which I did gladly, with great reverence and respect for this loving family. As the prayer ended, the patriarch breathed his last breath, and he moved from this life to the life beyond, and he went home to God. After this moment, which brought tears to everyone's eyes, mine included, they broke out the coffee that they had brought. Apparently, it's a tradition, and everyone had to drink a strong cup of Cuban espresso in the honor of their loved one. Even I was given a cup of that very strong brew and was included in the final toast in honor of a life well lived. Another time, I remember sitting with a woman who is diagnosed with a terminal form of brain cancer. I remember sitting with her as she worked through her anger and through her grief. Never did she say, "Gee, I wish I had spent more time at work," or "Why didn't I buy more stuff?" No. Instead, this beautiful, wonderful soul expressed some of her deep regrets of not spending more time with family, anger at what she still wanted to do and at the time that had been robbed from her, things near and dear to her, her daughter, her grandchildren, her passion and love for writing, and the book that she was never going to be able to finish. Her frustration that not much was known about her particular type of cancer, yet billions of dollars of research were spent focusing on breast cancer. I remember talking about how much she hated the color pink and how her cancer deserves just as much research as any others. I listened to her calmly and prayed with her at her request before leaving. Joy and sorrow, anger and acceptance, all different but important parts of both living and dying. And as I think about that, I wonder about us, how often we are guilty of living as though we were already dead. We move around life not experiencing the wonders and blessings that are there for us. If Ezekiel were suddenly picked up and transported to our time and our day and our age, would he see dead bones walking around with faces stuck in smartphones or to the TV? Working for more stuff, for some unattainable goal, while the world around us slowly dies. In his vision, Ezekiel is taken to a valley full of dry bones. Full of dry bones. Most people gloss over that detail, dry, but it's an important one. See, dry bones are old. They're very old. And they're brittle and hollow because all the marrow is gone, which means they're easily broken. Dry bones, brittle, hollow, easily broken. Sadly, this does often describe the spirit of many of us today. Hollow. We have emptied out so much of what it means to live and so much of what brings importance to our life and meaning to our life that we don't see joy anymore. How are you doing? Tired? Really a code word for hollow, exhausted, worn out. We live day to day without really seeing or experiencing what we are doing. One of my neuropsychologists at the hospital does a class on mindfulness, and she talks about how we move around on autopilot. We just go around on auto. We get to work, and then we wonder, gee, I wonder how I got here. We know our routines. We go throughout our day. We go grocery shopping. We go home. We do the baths. We put the kids to bed. We go to bed, and we wake up to do it all again the next day, never having to spare a thought for what comes next. And we continue to give, and we move, and we work, and we hollow ourselves out a little more. Brittle. We become brittle. We develop bitterness. Anger and anxiety run close to the surface, and we find ourselves full of cynicism or sarcasm. Pull, push, prod, poke us a little bit too much, and we start to splinter and disintegrate because we then become easily broken. Doesn't take much for any of us to be pushed beyond our limit anymore, to be pushed beyond what we can bear. Our anger boils over, our bodies give in to stress, and stress causes many diseases: heart disease, strokes, chronic pain, depression. Welcome to the modern era of the Valley of Dry Bones. We're all in good company. Thankfully, we know that what we see and what Ezekiel saw is not what God sees. While Ezekiel looked out and saw a valley of dry, brittle bones, he saw a valley of death. God saw potential. God saw life and the chance for a new life in that which was deemed dead. Prophesy to these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. I will lay sinews on you, and will cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. And you shall know that I am the Lord. And so we get rattled. Our bones rattle and our bones shake, and God moves in us, and somehow or some way, our carefully manicured autopilot pseudo-life shakes up, and something changes. We lose a job, we get a job, we add a job, we get married, we get divorced, we experience the death of a loved one or the birth of a loved one. Something happens. Something happens. And something changes, and God is there waiting to help. Our bones knit together, and we slowly find ourselves coming back to life. Rather than moving around on autopilot, we start to notice things. Wow, I didn't know the flowers were blooming yet. What a beautiful moment to have on our drive to work. The sunset looks amazing tonight. So glad that I'm sitting on my back porch spending time looking, drinking a glass of tea instead of trolling my Facebook feed. We spend more life in each moment, and as we do that, our sinew and our flesh are placed and renewed. Growth happens as God continues to work and woo us and draw us out of death and into life. And then breath. The breath is coming. I like that word, the breath, the spirit. It's the same word in both Hebrew and Greek. But in the Hebrew, the ruach, the spirit, the wind, the breath, is the very breath and spirit that hovered over the face of the waters in Genesis. That breath is commanded to enter. That wonderful spirit that wakes us up and renews us and revives us again. The breath and spirit that brings us life, new life. And so Ezekiel did what God said and finds a vast multitude of people standing before him. What a wondrous sight that would be to behold. And what a great sight it would be today. All those brittle bones now alive and renewed and living. To see people walking around and seeing the life around them. No longer a pile of bones tied to smartphones, desks, and things, but that we see the other people around us. We see the beauty of our world around us, and we can work to heal the wounds that we have created. What a beauty and blessing to live as a people who truly believe in the life of the kingdom of God that Jesus came to bring us and was sent to usher in. And what of us? We find that we have traded being dry, brittle, and hollow to being full of life, joy, hope, and love, changing a dead life to a living, breathing one. For those who were at the memorial service for Helen on Friday, you heard about how she lived her life, lived with all the passion that she had, and how her life shaped and impacted those around her. A life fully lived before she moved from our presence into God's. Now we have a life to live. Us here today, and for the rest of the days that we have. We have a mission that God has asked for us, has asked of each of us. So I challenge us to open up ourselves to God's presence and to the mindfulness of each and every moment. Let's let God knit us back together into a new life, so that we may not just have life, but that we may truly live. Amen.